Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Connection. I missed everybody last week. I hope everyone had a wonderful 4th of July. I did, but I was speaking with Miss Valerie right before we came on the air, and I said, not being here on Tuesday, though, kind of threw my whole week off. There was several really important things on Wednesday that I totally forgot about because I didn't realize it was Wednesday because I had not been here on Tuesday. So I am glad to be back on schedule and to be with everyone who is here in person, as well as everyone who is watching us and sharing this service with us online today. We're going to begin with our prayer of surrender and then on to our devotion. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will. Bring to me what you will. Take from me what you will. Awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me. The Christ mind is in me. The Christ power flows through me. And the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it. I perceive it. And now I receive it. I am surrendered. Amen. And so it is. Okay, the title of the devotion today is Freedom from Form. And it begins with this affirmation. If you have it in front of you and you want to say it with me. Today, I affirm that I am not my race, gender, sexual orientation, political party, or country of origin. I declare my freedom from form. All right, so the text begins like this. So many times we accept the definitions of ourselves that are really not who we are. These definitions may assist in describing what, where, and when, but they do not sufficiently define who. And if you have the devotion in front of you, you will see that that word who is in all caps because we really wanted to emphasize that fact. Then there's a list of all the descriptions that were in the affirmation. Race, gender, age, sexual orientation, religion, country of origin are all part of what, where, when, and perhaps even how we experience life. However, who, again in all caps, you are, is above all these labels, definitions, and temporary forms. You are a formless, normless, ageless, shapeless, nameless, blameless, shameless, labelless, skinless, sinless, endless, eternal spiritual being having a momentary expression in the physical material world. And I need to take a breath after all of that. So why does this matter? On the surface, celebrating our race or our culture, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or country of origin, we think it's something that's fairly harmless. And yet, when there is even subtle separation, defining or labeling of the human family, there will inevitably be the presence of and tendency toward otherness. Then from this otherness, so this otherness of I am this and you are not. Caste systems form, hierarchies are enabled, and violence becomes a probability. All right, so my brother wrote today's devotion, and what he's saying here is that anytime we allow ourselves to be separated, even if it's just in our own mind by these labels, these definitions, these forms that create, as I said, an idea of I am this and you are not. You are something else. You are other than me. Then that creates an opening for things like caste systems, hierarchies, and eventually violence, because the first step toward violence is to begin thinking of another person or of another group of people as other or different, which can turn into the judgment of better or worse, This race or this gender or the people who belong to this religion or political party are better or worse than this other group over here. That's what it leads to. That type of judgmental thinking can lead you all the way down the road from they're worse to they're worthless to they need to be eliminated. Now, that sounds drastic, I know, but we're going to see later on in today's teaching just how that not only can happen, but has happened and has ended in tragedy. Okay, so he shares a quote then by Judah Krishnamurti about how to overcome this way of thinking. And the quote is this: "When you call yourself an Indian or a Muslim or a Christian or a European or anything else, you are being violent." All right, now time out here. Again, you may be thinking, well, that's a little extreme. Why is that violent? What's wrong with being proud of who you are or where you come from, or how you choose to express yourself? And the answer is there's nothing wrong with it unless you don't afford that same right to everyone else, especially those who do not define themselves with the same labels you define yourself. He continues, "Do you see why it is violent? Because you are separating yourself from the rest of mankind. When you separate yourself by belief, by nationality, by tradition, it breeds violence. So, a man who is seeking to understand violence does not belong to any country, to any religion, to any political party or partial system. He is concerned with the total understanding of mankind." End quote. Okay, so there it is. If you want to avoid violence, then you have to go back and discover what the source of it is. And Krishnamurti is suggesting here that it's separation, that's where it begins. So to lessen the severity of this concept and to rightly divide it a little, yes, it's great that you are proud of certain things about yourself. And you can define yourself however you want to. But just do it with the full knowledge that everyone else gets to do it too. And once you begin othering people and letting your definitions of yourself divide you from them and turn into this judgment of better or worse, good and bad, right and wrong, then it might be a slippery slope that contains the possibility of ending in violence. And his remedy to this is being concerned with the total understanding of mankind, or in other words, putting yourself in the shoes of another and treating them with the same level of love and respect you want them to have toward you. Simple, not always easy, but simple. So let's say the ending prayer together. Formless Spirit, awaken my vision. Open my eyes to my eternal self and soul. Grant me the grace to live above form. Amen. All right, amen. We're going to continue discussing that topic in just a moment. But before that, I want to make a little announcement, and then we'll say our connection affirmation. As some of you already know, but I just wanted to make those of you who are not aware of it aware that Miss Christine McGee, who is, I'm not going to say was, longtime faithful member here, has made her transition last Sunday. We do not have the specifics of when the service will be, but we will get that information to you as soon as we can. Miss Christine was such a special person. I remember the last time I saw her, she was still smiling. She was laughing. She was recounting with me stories over the years of things that had happened in the church and wonderful memories. She was just a wonderful, wonderful spirit who is still with us in spirit, and we love her very much. And we will certainly let you know when the details of the service to celebrate her life. Okay, so now we're going to say our connection affirmation. I allow perfect health in my body, perfect peace in my mind, perfect unconditional love in my heart, and the perfect divine timing of spirit to guide my life in thought, word, and deed. Several years ago, I shared a story with you that I'm going to revisit today about a woman who survived a horrible time of violence in her country which was the result of exactly what we just talked about in the devotion, the separation of people through various labels and definitions. It was so extreme in this particular case that it led to one of the worst genocides in human history. But this woman not only survived it, she was able to thrive afterwards because she came to understand this concept of rising above form of all the labels through love and forgiveness and letting go of her attachment to a certain definition of herself and of others, and putting herself in the shoes of the other and making a conscious choice to follow the path of love and unity rather than the path of separation and violence. It is a beautiful story that begins with a concept called alchemy, which I am going to talk about right now. Alchemy, in case you don't know, is the process of transforming one substance into another, particularly the conversion of a base metal like lead into gold. And even though it's a real physical practice, it's also used more often, in fact, as a metaphor. So it's all about taking something that is worth less, not worthless, but worth less, and turning it into something that is worth more. Spiritual or metaphysical alchemists, then, are people who know how to take poison and transmute it into medicine. Now, as we know, a lot of times a medicine or some other substance that has healing properties can also have aspects to them that are poisonous if they're given in the wrong dose or if they're handled inappropriately. For example, the anti-venom that is used to treat snake bites is made from the snake venom itself. Also, another example, some vaccines contain a little part of the virus or the disease that they are trying to prevent. So in order to get to the part that's medicinal, you've got to take the poison out. First of all, you've got to take in the poison, and then separate it or separate it out or strip away the harmful part. So transmuting poison into medicine involves distilling the poisonous substance down to its essence and then extracting the part that is medicine. That is what we know as spiritual alchemy. I heard someone say the other day that pain is finite, but the gift of the lesson you learn from that pain, if handled appropriately, is eternal. You never lose the gift of that lesson, but you've got to let go. You've got to learn to let go of the painful part, because if you don't, that's the part that can become poisonous and end up infecting or affecting your entire system. So the story I'm going to share with you today is how a woman was able to do this in her own life. She was able to take a horribly violent situation that was the result of people identifying with certain labels and definitions and allowing them to cause separation that eventually led to physical violence, like we were just talking about in the devotion, and transmute it. She was able to take that and transmute it into something positive. Her name is Immaculée Ilibagiza, and her story takes place in Rwanda during the genocide that happened in 1994. And it's absolutely the best example I could find to illustrate this concept of spiritual alchemy, where a person is forced to face and take in some form of emotional poison, but somehow transmute it into powerful medicine for herself as well as others. So some of you may be familiar with the details, but in case you're not, just as a backdrop, there were two tribes in the nation of Rwanda who had been experiencing infighting between themselves for decades. But in 1994, it kind of all came to a head with an incident that ended in the killing of their president. And this threw their entire country into chaos and civil war, where the Hutu tribe basically went on a 100-day killing spree of the other tribe, who were called the Tutsis. And this woman, Immaculée, was a Tutsi. She was part of the Tutsi tribe. So I'm going to read the story that she told, as she told it in her own words. And it's a little bit longer than some of the stories I tell you, but I promise it's one of the most riveting stories you will ever hear, and it has such a wonderful message. So this is from something called The Power of the Heart, and she was just speaking into the camera, and it's her story. She says, "When the violence started, my parents sent me to a neighbor's house who was part of the Hutu tribe." So she was a Tutsi, and when all of this started, her parents sent her to a neighbor who was part of the opposite tribe, the part that was doing all the killing. He was a Protestant pastor. He hid me in a bathroom with 7 other women. We couldn't speak. We couldn't turn on the water. We couldn't take a shower. We could only flush the toilet when someone in the next bathroom was also flushing the toilet at the same time. His children didn't even know we were there because he didn't want them to have that information so it could not be tortured out of them. I thought we might have to stay there for a few days, a week at most. We ended up being in there for 3 months, just waiting for killers to find us every day. And then, as a part of the video, they played this clip from what was being broadcast on the radio all over the country at that time. And the voice on the radio said this: "You must not let your guard down. The Tutsi snakes are hiding in the grass, so make sure you have your machete ready to chop the snakes in half." So this is the message that this one tribe was hearing over the state radio. All right, so one tribe, one group was being turned against another and dehumanized. They were referring to them as snakes and cockroaches. Okay, so they were othering. They were saying, "I am this and you are not." That's where it started. So even though they had the same color skin, even though they lived next to each other in the same country, many of them had been raised in the same neighborhoods, schools, churches, this was able to happen when they began to define themselves as either of this tribe or this tribe. Okay. So she continues, "The Hutu militias made up of both professional military men as well as ordinary citizens began going house to house to see if any Tutsis were being hidden. The government was paying them to do this. The first time they came to the house we were hiding in, I saw them through the tiny window of the bathroom. They made a circle around the whole house so no one could jump out of the window or run out the back door and get away. And they all started screaming. They searched every room, looked under every bed. They even opened up suitcases to make sure there were no small children or babies being hidden. They went into the attic with flashlights. They checked the top of the roof to make sure no one was lying up there. I remembered asking God, if you are really up there controlling everything, please don't let them find the door to this bathroom. I felt like there were 1,000 needles sticking into my body. It wasn't just a little bit of fear, it was a great deal of fear. I thought my life was about to be over and I was about to be cut in half by a machete. Then I heard the pastor talking to one of them saying, I am a good Hutu. I would never hide any Tutsis. There are no Tutsis here. One of them came right to the door of the bathroom and even touched the handle. And then we heard him tell the pastor, I trust you. You are a good man. You are one of us now. Now see what he said? Remember, you are one of us. 5 hours later, the pastor finally felt safe enough to open the door and talk to us. He told us he didn't know how we were still alive, but that whatever we were doing, praying to God or whatever, to keep doing it because what had just happened was a miracle, and he gave us a Bible. I experienced feelings in that bathroom I had never felt in my life. Anger so strong I could not begin to put it into words. To hate one person is bad enough. I hated 8 million people. And I remember thinking, if I ever get out of here, I'm going to be a soldier. I will train my body to have big muscles so I can kill as many of them as possible. In my mind and imagination, I was killing Hutus daily. These thoughts would make me so full of anger that I was drenched with sweat just sitting there in the bathroom thinking about it. My head would ache and my stomach would hurt. I realized it was my thoughts that were creating this poison inside me, constantly imagining the horrible things I wanted to do to those who were terrorizing me. Looking back now, I realize it is very hard to remember love when you are scared. Being afraid is one of the strongest and most debilitating emotions in the human experience. Fear drowns out all other emotions. And then I remember the thought coming to me. This home I'm hiding in has 2 bathrooms. It is the only home in the whole village that has 2 bathrooms inside the house. If it was not for that, we could not have been hidden so easily. One of the reasons the men had stopped searching that day was because they did not expect there to be 2 bathrooms. And when that thought came to me, I remember feeling grateful, and that made me feel good. That feeling was so distinctive and different from my feelings of anger. It was like the difference between somebody pushing you down and somebody lifting you up. And then I started being grateful that the man had children, and so it was not suspicious for him to have extra food in the house. Thank God we could eat, even though it was very little because there were 8 of us. And then I became grateful that I was not all alone. Even though we could not speak, I had others that I could touch and make eye contact with. I started to see the good in everything, no matter how small. When I began thinking this way, I felt much better and much smarter. One day the pastor opened the door and said, "They are coming back again." This time it was so clear in my head, "They will find you this time." So I said, "Pastor, push the wardrobe in front of the door so they cannot see there is a door here." He didn't want to at first, afraid someone would remember that there was a door from before and it would arouse suspicion. But I begged him, and finally he agreed. I don't think I could have heard that voice in my heart speaking to me so clearly and telling me to do that if I had still been having thoughts of anger. They came again to search the house. I heard a voice and realized he was talking about me. He said, "Where is she, Pastor? This is the last place she was seen. We know she's here." And then he called out my name. And he said, "I've killed 399 cockroaches, and I want Immaculée to be the 400th. And I was thinking, I know this man. I recognize his voice. I went to elementary school with him, someone I had considered a friend. How can he have killed 399 people with a machete and be proud of it? I could not imagine it. They opened the door of the wardrobe. They surely would have found us if it hadn't been in front of the bathroom door. Immediately I knew it was because of my idea that we had been saved again. But it was not a feeling of good for me. It was more like, keep listening. Keep listening to that voice, the one that is not covered up by fear and hate, envy and jealousy, or anything unloving. But when they left, my anger came right back, and it was like a veil in front of my face. I couldn't see through it, and I couldn't think. And then I realized my body was aching again. My head was pounding. But that's what happens when people are trying to kill you. You get angry. I was paying a price with my own body. Because of anger, I couldn't remember how to smile. I felt like my mouth was permanently twisted. I wished to be innocent again. I wished to see the good in people again. But to me, they were animals. Every day, I would repeat the Lord's Prayer about 200 times. But when I reached the part that said, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us," I couldn't say it. This is an unforgivable thing. They are trying to kill me. How do you forgive such a thing? So I would just skip that part of the prayer. I knew lies didn't sit well with God, And now that I was not saying that part, I felt like I was not lying to God when I prayed. But then I began to hear that voice again, saying to me, "Who are you to edit the prayer of Jesus?" And there was nothing else to do at that point but surrender. I fell to my knees, I put my hands up, and I begged God. I said, "I'm going to put your prayer back the way it was, because if you told us to pray this way, it must be the right thing to do. I'm putting it into your hands. If you know how to forgive, if you knew how to forgive the people who were killing you, then I must forgive. Help me do the same. I am willing." And that was the beginning of a big shift for me. All right, so we've talked about this so many times before. Just surrendering, even when you don't understand, even when horrible things are in your present, that you're looking straight into horrible things, just surrendering, saying, "God help me, I am willing." One night, I opened my eyes from sleeping, and it was like I began to see faces in the tiles on the bathroom wall. The shower was divided into two parts. One side was love, and the other side was hate. On the side of love, I saw the faces of Mandela and Mother Teresa, Gandhi, and Martin Luther King Jr., people who had suffered, but who had still stood up for the truth and for love, and they defended the rights of other human beings. In the tiles on the other side of the shower, I saw the faces of people like Hitler, men in hoods in America, and the men who had come looking for me to kill me. They were vengeful, angry faces. And then, on that same side of the shower, I saw my own face, and it, too, was full of anger. I felt like God was asking me, "Where do you want to stand? Where do you want to belong? Are you going to be on the side of love or on the side of hate?" And guess what? The faces on the side of love, they have known the injustice and they have endured the hatred of others, but still they chose to love. Now it's your choice. I made the choice to be on the side of love at that moment, and I began to believe that people can change, because I knew how much I had changed since the day I walked into that house. And then I saw my face in the tiles move from the side of hate to the side of love. That's when I let it all go. It was as if I was no longer a captive in that tiny bathroom. I was suddenly transported to an open place with fresh air. My body felt like it was floating, and in my heart, I was in paradise. So what had she done? She had risen above the definitions of form. I thought about those killers, and I felt compassion. How are they going to feel one day when they wake up and realize what they have done? When we were finally able to leave the house, it was like the end of the world. 1 million people had been killed. My mother and father, my 2 brothers, my grandparents, most of my neighbors, my schoolmates, my best friends, all gone. But I was strong inside. I was ready to face life in a different way. Physically, I was like a skeleton. I only weighed 65 pounds. But inside, I felt huge. I felt beautiful. I felt like every human being I saw was a gift from God. I just wanted to serve and help and care for others in whatever way I could. I was grateful for everything I had always taken for granted before. I was thankful to be able to talk again and raise my voice. I was thankful to see the trees swaying in the wind. I hadn't been able to do that or see that for 3 months. I was thankful for being able to see the moon and the stars, which I had hardly ever paid attention to before. I was filled with an overwhelming sense of love and appreciation. The mind can understand wholeness as a concept, but only the heart can experience the feeling of wholeness, and I felt whole. In our heads, we are always judging. We are always separating between right and wrong, black and white, good and bad. And because of this, we are always off balance. The heart is much wiser than the head. Through the eyes of the heart, black and white judgments or separations disappear because the heart is balanced by a deeper truth. I will be forever grateful for those 3 months in that bathroom. Can you imagine being grateful for that experience after you've lived through it? But she was. To see where evil can take people, but to also know where love can take them, to know where it took me. When you can give thanks for it all and love without conditions, then you will be truly free. Life is full of challenges and hardships, which are often the intense heat and fire that break us open to discover things within us that we would never have discovered otherwise. A match holds the potential for fire, but until it strikes against something, there is no flame. By coming up against obstacles, our heart becomes a flame, and that's what produces the light and warmth that comes from us that we can give to others. You can be grateful even for the experiences you wish you hadn't had. In those moments, true masters say, "Thank you to life. Thank you to God. Thank you for this experience because I know that eventually I will see the extraordinary gift that has been folded into this encounter." So like I said earlier, pain is finite, but often the gift that the pain brings is eternal. About 6 months after the genocide, people kept telling me it was too soon for me to be happy and forgive, and that one day I would crash when I saw the people again who tried to hurt me, and then my anger would return. And this caused me to doubt myself a little. So she started listening to those people who said, "How can you be so happy? How can you be thankful for this? This is not going to last. You're not going to be able to keep this love in your heart." So I went to the prison to visit the man who had killed some of my family members just to see how I would feel. The head of the jail was a friend of my father's who had also lost his wife and 5 children in the massacre. He led me into a room and left a large, heavy club on the table in front of me. He said, "You can hit him if you want. I will protect you. Please ease your pain." Then he brought the man in, and I remembered him. He used to be a teacher. He had actually been like a father to me. His children were my age. I used to have lunch at their home sometimes. I couldn't believe it was him who had done this to my family. I just broke down and cried. I dropped the club onto the table and said, "I forgive you." It wasn't like I had planned to say those words. I didn't know what I was going to do when I saw him, but all I could feel was compassion for him, and I wanted him to be free like I was free. I wanted him to be free to go through his own journey. So what did she do? She put herself, as difficult as it was, into his shoes, and she stopped defining him as other. The head of the jail was so mad and asked me what was wrong with me. He accused me of not loving my parents, but I had forgotten that he was even there. I didn't really understand why I forgave, except that in that moment I wanted to. Even though in a way it felt like the weak thing to do, I knew somewhere deeper that it was the right thing to do. Whew. So, as I said, what a powerful example of spiritual alchemy. That is truly taking what was meant for evil and turning it into good. That is taking the violence of separation completely out of the equation. I want to end today with another story. And this one is much shorter, and it's actually from the opposite perspective. It's from the perspective of someone who had been the killer. But it speaks to the power that each of us has to decide how we're going to live, no matter what's going on around us, or as Immaculée described, the power to decide which side you want to belong to, love or hate, unity or separation. This one is called The Power of the Heart, and it is a Japanese warrior proverb. It says, there is an old Japanese parable about a troubled warrior who is haunted by the ghosts of the lives he had taken in battle. He goes to the home of an old woman who is known as the Great Silk Sage and says to her, "I must know if heaven and hell exist. So many have been slaughtered, and for them I hope there is a heaven. But I have killed so many that for me I pray there is no hell. So please, I must know." She calmly turns to him and replies, "Why would I want to waste such priceless wisdom on a heartless coward like you?" Her insult angered the warrior, and he immediately drew his sword. In an instant, it was at her throat. "What did you say to me, old woman?" he asked, enraged. Without flinching, she replies again, "And what do you intend to do now? Prove that you are a coward by killing a poor defenseless woman? I've never seen such weakness in a warrior." As his rage grows, he draws his sword back and above his head, preparing to plunge it into her. She raises her hand and says, "That, what you're feeling right now, is hell." His sword drops to his side as he dissolves into tears, recalling the many times before that he has raised his sword in anger and realizing that he never wants to do it again because he can no longer stand all the faces that haunt him. The sage watches him sob for a moment and then says, "And that, what you're feeling now, the relief in your heart and the desire to change, that is heaven." So, there is another good example of where the violence of separation that begins with something as simple as saying, "I am this and you are not," or "I am that and you are not. You are other." These stories show us where that kind of thinking can lead. If you follow that road, it can only lead to your own personal hell. But if you turn away from the violence of separation, then it is possible for you to live in your own version of heaven on earth. Amen? Amen. All right, Mom, I didn't think you were coming today. Yay. Okay, let's stand together and sing our ending song. Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say amen. Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say amen. Be at peace. Have a great week. We will see you next week. I love you. Goodbye.